The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Asian shares trade mixed on the first day of the week, with some markets open and others closed. South Korea's Kospi and China's Shanghai Composite remain closed. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Australia's ASX fall, while Singapore's Straits Times and Japan's Nikkei post gains following Japan's ruling party electing an ultra-conservative leader, likely the first woman prime minister. The U.S. dollar strengthens against the Japanese yen, the Singapore dollar and the Thai baht, but remains flat against the Hong Kong dollar. The Australian dollar also holds steady versus the greenback. In commodities, gold rises more than 1%, while oil prices trend higher. In crypto, Bitcoin gains 0.7%, and Ethereum edges up 0.3%. The government's debt service bill surges, more than tripling in August to 664.72 billion pesos. Latest data from the Bureau of Treasury show payments jumped from just 186.22 billion pesos in the same month last year. The bulk came from amortization or principal payments, which spiked to 601.62 billion pesos, up sharply from 133.44 billion a year ago. The spike highlights the growing burden of public debt and renews calls to curb corruption and improve spending efficiency, so borrowed funds translate into real results. The government says the slowdown in the Philippine economy is not due to alleged corruption in budget allocations. Ivy Reyes has the details. Go ahead, Ivy.
The government denied that any reduced growth rate in the Philippines' economy is due to domestic factors or issues, most especially the widespread corruption anomaly on budget insertions. The Department of Economy, Planning and Development, or DepDev, says there is an elevated uncertainty in the global market impacting economic flow. DepDev Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said even major organizations like the International Monetary Fund have also reported a deterioration.
These corruption issues, we hope that that is a temporary thing. As I said, we expect to come up with measures that will improve the governance of our public spending, and that if the cost, short-term cost, is compensated by a much improved environment for the medium term and long term for investment, I think that that's not necessarily bad.
Balisacan says it is the trade deficit that factors in the country's economic growth, not so much the domestic performance of various sectors. Despite this, Balisacan maintains that a manageable inflation rate of 2 to 4% is achievable for the Philippines. When asked for safeguarding measures against corruption, the DepDev chief assures Filipinos that the administration is pushing for stricter transparency policies through digitalizing bureaucracy and the private economy. Addressing the issue of beneficial ownership amid the flood control scandal, the Budget Department said the new Procurement Act of 2023 serves as a deterrent against corruption, as all contract details are required to be disclosed under this law. When resigned Ako Bicol party list Zaldi Ko was recommended to be slapped with corruption raps, beneficial ownership was one of the contentions, despite Ko saying he has divested his interests. The graft and malversation recommendations filed against Ko pertains to a 289.5 million peso flood control project in Nauhan Oriental, Mindoro. Meanwhile, the World Bank commends the Philippines as a front runner in the region and said they have high hopes the country will make it through the threshold in no time. Earlier this morning, President Bongbong Marcos underscored accountability in government funding. He says his administration will ensure that no budget will go to waste and no tolerance will be imposed in any measurement that counters the administration's goal to serve the nation's interests. Mai.
Thank you for that report, Ivy Reyes. A tougher tone from Malacanang. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is demanding airtight cases against those behind anomalous and ghost flood control projects, saying the public deserves real accountability. In a teaser for his next podcast, the president said many of those now under investigation are far from guiltless, stressing that prosecutors must file strong, well-documented cases backed by solid evidence. He also reiterated that the fight against corruption must be rooted in the rule of law to ensure accountability while upholding due process. The Independent Commission on Infrastructure, formed by the president, continues to investigate irregularities in flood control and other public works projects spanning the past decade. Senate Minority Leader Alan Peter Cayetano has proposed a drastic measure for the government to regain the people's trust amid the flood control scandal. In a social media post, Cayetano suggested every government official from the president down to Congress to resign, paving the way for a snap election. That's with the additional condition that no incumbent would be allowed to run for one election cycle. The Senate Minority Leader states that now more than ever, politicians are seen as suspects. As calls for another people power movement grow louder, Cayetano says that a voluntary surrender of power is the more responsible path forward. He adds the government has its bureaucracy and LGUs will continue to run and manage things while the process takes place. Cayetano's suggestion seems to have gained the support of political strategist Lito Banayo. In a statement sent to BNC, Banayo said Cayetano's call for a snap election is constitutionally possible only if all of the nationally elected officials resign en masse. He adds it reflects the public's wide disenchantment over government and a total resentment about how their taxes have gone into greedy pockets. He also says the system that allows this kind of greed to fester needs a cleansing, and people may find 2028 far too distant for change. But the chairman of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Sergio Ortiz Luis, said that while a lot of people may agree with Cayetano, it's too complicated, so it's not going to happen. Luis suspects the senator might end up the only one resigning. President Bongbong Marcos, for his part, says resignation is not enough, citing the great deal of damage that has been caused by the flood control scandal. Public Works Secretary Vince Dizon spent the weekend on the ground in quake-hit Cebu, overseeing shelter construction and damage assessments in hard-hit communities. In Bogo City, Dizon inspected the ongoing building of temporary shelters, joined by Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco and Philippine Red Cross Chairman Richard Gordon. Many residents remain hesitant to return home amid continuing aftershocks. The secretary also visited the town of Medellin, where another tent city is under construction, and distributed relief supplies to displaced families. In San Remigio, more temporary shelters are being built as the DPWH assesses the structural integrity of public buildings and heritage churches. The agency is also working with the National Historical Commission of the Philippines to restore damaged heritage sites. Cebu City Vice Mayor Tommy Osmeña met with a representative of one BPO firm on Monday, as well as the Labor Department's Assistant Regional Director. He will be meeting with more BPOs on Tuesday to discuss disaster protocols and evacuation procedures, among others. The Labor Department has issued a cease and desist order against one BPO company in Cebu for failing to protect its employees during disasters. It says the company had no disaster response plan in place and urged it to implement flexible working arrangements instead. We're taking a short break. More stories are coming up next. You're watching Business Brief. You're back on Business Brief. The property market sees signs of stronger growth this year despite headwinds. Paulo Barcelon is in Taguig City for the details on the Lichu Property Consultants' third quarter report. Paulo, what can you tell us?
Both residential and office consumers are looking at peace of mind from disasters and calamities as property trends lean towards resilience and safety. In its Q3 briefing, Lichu Property Consultants say master plan properties are the way forward for those looking for new condos or companies selecting where to establish their business.
In particular, what we noticed are influx of occupiers, especially for the provinces. They're more keen to look for master planned townships. There are available buildings, standalone type, across several provinces. You have Davao, Cebu, and Iloilo. These master plan communities are typically, within walking distance. And it's a similar performance with Metro Manila. You have the likes of townships in Quezon City. You have Vertis, Centris, Araneta, most especially. Araneta has been getting a lot of demand.
Amid the flood control scandal, Lichu analysts believe the impact of embezzled money on the sale of luxury properties is still speculative at this point, but Q3 residential market sales are up compared to the same period last year. Condominium sales are up 12% with over 7,000 units sold. High-end and luxury units are among those with the biggest growth year-on-year, while other income sectors are also getting good pickups. Lichu also says disasters such as the strong quake in Cebu have made developers choose more options, and that developer reputation is a key factor in selecting locations for business expansion. Close to 80,000 units, meanwhile, are still unsold across Metro Manila, with growth in the condo sector positive across the BGC and Taguig areas, while Makati, Alabang, Ortigas, and Mandaluyong rent levels are down. Now, Lichu adds rental rates decline across most districts due to the exit of Philippine offshore gaming operations or POGOs, and despite this, office demand is at over 960,000 square meters, reflecting resilience despite global headwinds in the property sector. Mai.
Thank you for that report. Paulo Barcelon. Despite political turmoil and a widening corruption probe, economists are betting that domestic demand will keep the economy on track. Union Bank kept its GDP growth outlook at 5.5% for 2025, with a 5.7% projection for 2026, supported by strong household spending and investments. BPI and Pantheon Macroeconomics also maintain their forecasts at 5.6 and 5.3% respectively, with Pantheon describing its view as already on the downbeat side. However, the government's flood control corruption probe is expected to slow infrastructure spending and dent investor sentiment. International institutions like the ADB and the IMF have also lowered their Philippine growth outlooks, citing global uncertainties and the domestic political climate. The Agriculture Department is pushing to secure lower tariffs for Philippine bananas, one of the country's top exports to Japan. This as Manila looks to strengthen trade ties and protect farmers' competitiveness. Paulo Barcelon returns with this report.
Japan is now open to renew talks to lower its tariffs on Philippine bananas. According to Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tu Laurel, Japan is willing to discuss the matter if the Philippines can offer a deal to Tokyo, something he plans to refer to the Department of Trade and Industry in hopes of strengthening the bilateral agreements between the two countries. Laurel adds that while the Philippines is in the process of joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would open up more export markets such as the UK and Canada, the talks with Japan remain crucial.
I really hope that we can resolve this issue as soon as possible. But of course, they have their position. While the Philippines is also going on the avenue of CPTPP, it's basically an agreement among nations on that we can eventually go duty free into Japan, but might take 5 years to complete. So we are looking at the angle on bilateral agreements in order to speed up the process.
The country's banana exports remain a major trade commodity to Japan, with no less than 1 million metric tons of bananas imported by Japan each year. The industry also provides over 700,000 jobs and contributes about $1 billion annually to the economy. Under the Japan-Philippines Economic Partnership Agreement, or JPEPA, signed in 2006, Philippine bananas face higher tariffs, particularly from April to September, putting them at a disadvantage compared to zero or preferential tariffs enjoyed by exporters from Cambodia, Laos, Mexico, and Vietnam. The DA is pushing for a gradual tariff reduction on Philippine bananas exported to Japan, similar to the ongoing gradual tariff decrease between the Philippines and South Korea, where rates will be brought down to zero within 5 years. Meanwhile, the recently approved Animal Industry Development and Competitiveness Act, or AIDCA, is being hailed as a big win for the animal industry. Under the new law, almost 30% of the 20 billion peso fund for animal competitiveness will be allocated to help livestock raisers recover, especially hog farmers affected by the African swine fever, or ASF.
That will be used for repopulation of lalo na yung ating baboy, no? Ang nawala sa ating baboy, 6 million heads.
The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources continues to monitor fishermen sailing in the West Philippine Sea as the Philippines urges China not to involve fishers or the issue of food security in the ongoing maritime dispute. Paulo Barcelon, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Philippine semiconductor and electronics industry is expecting moderate growth for the sector by the end of 2025, despite earlier flat projections. On BNC's Business 360, SAPI President Dan Lachica said they attribute this development to strong demand in emerging technologies such as AI, big data, and IoT, which are driving export performance. He believes hitting $45 billion in exports is attainable, but he is cautious about making any definitive predictions pending final numbers later this year.
But right now, what we see would be demand for automotive electronics, medical, even data storage, as you know, with big data coming up, and the demand for information and cybersecurity, right? On the other side, we've seen a softening in office equipment and even radar equipment. So those are the main drivers, both on the positive and the negative side.
Toyota Financial Services Philippines, or TFSPH, will borrow 2 billion pesos through its first bond offering. In its disclosure, GT Capital says the offer includes 2 series 2-year bonds due 2027 at 5.8% and 3-year bonds due 2028 at 5.9%. The offer runs from October 6 to 13. The borrowed funds will diversify funding sources and support asset growth, targeting both institutional and individual investors. TFSPH receives a PRS AAA rating with stable outlook, reflecting strong shareholders, good asset quality, and sustained revenue growth. It is 40% owned by GT Capital and 60% by Japan-based Toyota Financial Services Corporation, supporting Toyota sales in the Philippines. Century Pacific Food, or CNPF, has been recognized for leadership, governance, and sustainable growth. In Extel's Asia Executive Team survey, it was named a most honored company. President and Chief Executive Officer Chodoro Po and Chief Finance Officer Chad Manapat were among the top 3 in the consumer staples sector. Po and Manapat were named Philippines' best CEO and CFO, while the board of directors was recognized for stewardship for the 3rd year running. A year into its takeover, Ramon Ang's new NAIA Infracorp is giving the country's main gateway a high-tech makeover, promising faster, cleaner, and more efficient airport operations. Here's a portion of their new video presentation.
1 year after the NNIC took over operations of NAIA, the results will speak for themselves. On-time performance has reached a single-day record of 92.29%, the highest in NAIA's history. over 51.7 million passengers were served and 283,771 flights handled. New routes have connected Manila to cities like Paris, Da Nang, Sapporo, and New Delhi. A new global partner has also joined NAIA, SIA Engineering, one of Asia's largest aircraft MRO operators. Financially, more than 52 billion pesos has already been remitted by NNIC to the government, including the 30 billion pesos upfront payment. Under the PPP, over 82.16% of NAIA's revenues go directly to the government, making sure the benefits of this airport flow straight back to the Filipino people. NNIC has also committed 72 billion pesos for a 5-year modernization program, 3.5 billion pesos of which has already been invested in year 1 on upgrades passengers can now see and feel.
Philippine shares closed the first trading day of the week in negative territory. The PSEI drops nearly 2% to close at 6,000, making it the worst performer in Asia. Among sectoral indices, only mining and oil is in the green, with holding firms falling the most at over 2%. Decliners outnumber advancers 139 to 64, with value turnover reaching 12.1 billion pesos. All of the day's most active stocks are in the red, with BPI falling the most at almost 4%. On currencies, the peso trades at 58.07 against the US dollar, down from the previous close of 57.88. That's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. I'll see you then.